I came home to my condo after a grueling night shift, only to find my mother-in-law cooking lunch in my kitchen. "Oh, it's so good you're home. Your things are already out in the hallway. Take them, sweetheart. My daughter and her husband will be here soon. They have kids, and they need this condo more than you do." After those words, there was no stopping me. My mother-in-law was absolutely horrified by what I did next. But before we begin, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you, and enjoy the story. Sarah pushed the door of her apartment open with her shoulder, juggling a bag of groceries and her heavy nursing tote. The shift had been brutal, 12 hours on her feet at the hospital, 3 critical patients, one of whom nearly coded and had to be rushed to the ICU. Her head throbbed with exhaustion, and her feet ached. She wanted only one thing: to drag herself to the couch, kick off her cursed scrubs and shoes, and close her eyes for at least an hour. But something was off. Sarah froze in the entryway, not immediately grasping what had changed. Then it hit her. The accent chair was against a different wall. The coffee table had migrated to the window. The floor lamp, which she had always kept in the corner, was now proudly displayed next to the bookcase. Even the area rug had been rotated 90 degrees. Someone had been playing house in her absence. On the kitchen island lay a note, written in large, sweeping handwriting. "Did a little rearranging. It's much cozier this way. No need to thank me. Carol." Sarah slowly crumpled the note in her fist. Her jaw clenched from the words she was holding back. She had bought this 2-bedroom condo in the city 5 years ago. She had been saving for it since she was 18, denying herself everything. She worked double shifts, picked up weekend rotations at private urgent care clinics, and scrimped on clothes and going out. Every single dollar went straight into her savings account. When the keys finally landed in her hands, it was the best day of her life. 3 years ago, she married David. He moved in with her. He was a calm, non-confrontational guy who worked as a mid-level manager at a retail logistics company. His salary was strictly average, but Sarah didn't care. She made good money as a registered nurse, especially with night shift differentials and overtime. She didn't need a traditional breadwinner. She just needed a normal partner by her side, someone to share the daily routine with, and maybe, someday, to have kids with. David seemed to be exactly that kind of person, at least for the first 6 months. Then, his mother, Carol, fully entered their lives. At first, her mother-in-law rarely visited. She'd drop by once a month for coffee, bringing a Tupperware of baked goods or a pie. She acted polite, though Sarah could always feel the underlying tension in her gaze. Carol would assess the condo as if calculating what to move, what to throw away, and what to add. Over time, the visits became more frequent once every 2 weeks, then once a week. Then, she started showing up when Sarah wasn't home. And now, the furniture rearrangement. Sarah tossed the crumpled note into the trash can, shrugged off her jacket, and walked into the bedroom. David was still asleep, sprawled across the bed in his boxers and a t-shirt. He worked a standard 9 to 5, but usually stayed up until midnight playing strategy games on his PC. She lay down next to him without undressing and closed her eyes. But sleep wouldn't come. Her mind raced, picturing how his mother had walked in here with a key she shouldn't have and started shoving another woman's furniture around in another woman's home. A few hours later, David woke up, stretched, and sleepily kissed his wife on the shoulder. "How was your shift?" "Fine." Sarah sat up on the bed, staring down at him. "David, why does your mother have a key to my condo?" He blinked, not processing it right away. "What key to this condo? She was here while I was at work and rearranged all the furniture in the living room." David scratched the back of his neck and offered a guilty smile. "Well, I gave her a spare, just in case." "In case of what?" "You know, just in case something happens and we aren't home. Or if you lose your keys." Sarah stared at him in dead silence. He looked away. "She just worries about us. She wants to help. Helping is bringing over groceries or cleaning up when you're explicitly asked, not moving furniture around without the owner's permission." "Owners," David repeated, a hint of resentment in his voice. "I live here too, you know. You live here, but the condo is mine." He pressed his lips together, got out of bed, and pulled on his jeans. You always have to remind me of that. I only remind you when your mother crosses a boundary. She just wanted to do something nice. Doing something nice is asking if we need help, not breaking in here when I'm gone and redecorating to her own taste. David paced nervously across the room. All right, I'll tell her not to do it again. And take the key back from her. Sarah, come on, why? She's my mother, she's not a stranger. The keys, David. He sighed heavily and nodded. Fine, I'll get them back. But he didn't take the keys back. 2 weeks passed. Sarah intentionally didn't bring it up, choosing to observe. Carol was now showing up twice a week, and always when her daughter-in-law was out, David would mention it casually, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. Mom stopped by, brought some chili. Mom was here, she wiped down the windows. Mom left a casserole. Sarah said nothing, she just mentally cataloged it. Carol was staking her claim, conquering the territory inch by inch. A strange bottle of shampoo appeared in the guest bathroom. New oven mitts materialized in the kitchen. A pair of men's size 10 slippers, definitely not David's, showed up by the front door. And then something happened that finally put Sarah on high alert. She came home from a night shift on a Wednesday morning, trembling with exhaustion. A 47-year-old male patient had died at the hospital from a massive heart attack. They had tried to resuscitate him, but they were too late. Sarah always took these losses hard, though she tried her best not to let it show. In the staff break room, she changed out of her scrubs, got a coffee from the vending machine, and sat in a corner just to gather herself before the drive home. Brenda, a veteran nurse who had worked at the hospital for 35 years, sat down next to her. She was an experienced, blunt woman who could see right through people. "You doing okay?" she asked, pouring tea from her thermos. "I'm fine. Just a really rough night. It happens." Brenda paused, then added casually, "I hear your mother-in-law is a pretty busy lady." Sarah tensed up. "Where did you hear that?" "One of the janitorial staff lives in your building complex. Says she saw your mother-in-law in the lobby. She had her own keys to your place. She was bragging to the neighbors that her son and daughter-in-law have a really nice 2-bedroom. And," Brenda looked at her seriously, "and she was also saying that her daughter, Ashley, is looking for a place. Rent is too expensive. Her landlord just jacked up the price. She's got 2 kids, and her husband's warehouse is cutting his hours. Carol was complaining to everyone that she wants to help them, but she only has a 1-bedroom apartment herself." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Brenda, what are you getting at?" Brenda shrugged. "I'm just saying, keep your property documents locked up and away from prying eyes. People get very creative when they need to solve a housing crisis." Sarah thanked her and drove home, but her co-worker's words lodged in her brain like a splinter. She remembered Ashley. She had seen her vaguely a couple of times at family Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners. A woman in her late 20s, a dyed blonde with a perpetually sour expression, who worked part-time at some retail store while her husband drove a delivery truck, 2 preschool-aged kids. As soon as Sarah walked through her front door, she checked her documents. She kept them in a small, fireproof safe inside her home office closet. The property deed, the closing documents, the title insurance, everything was there. David had never asked where she kept her financial papers, and he didn't know the combination to the safe. Breathing a sigh of relief, Sarah went to sleep. The next few days passed quietly. Carol didn't show up. David acted normal. He went to work, came home, ate dinner, and played his PC games. Sarah almost convinced herself she was being paranoid, but one evening, while she was loading the dishwasher, David's phone rang on the living room couch. He had gone to the bathroom, leaving the phone behind. Sarah had no intention of eavesdropping, but Carol's voice on the speakerphone was so loud it was impossible to ignore. "Don't worry, it'll all work out. The 2-bedroom is going to free up, I'm telling you." Sarah froze with a plate in her hand. She wiped her hands on a towel, walked into the living room, and picked up the phone. "Good evening, Carol." A heavy pause hung on the line. "Oh, Sarah." "Hi. I was talking to David. I heard." "What 2-bedroom is going to free up? What are you talking about?" Carol scoffed, nervously. "Oh, I was talking about my apartment. I want to do some renovations, so I'm discussing it with Ashley. Maybe she can help me." You live in a one-bedroom. So what? I can call it whatever I want. Sarah didn't argue. She just silently placed the phone back on the couch. David walked out of the bathroom, picked up his phone, saw the call had dropped, and shot his wife a guilty look. Mom called? She did. What did she want? Ask her yourself. He didn't. And Sarah finally understood that a plan was in motion. Carol was weaving some kind of web, and David was either aware of it or, worse, actively participating. The next morning, Sarah woke up early, got dressed, and left. She returned an hour later with a licensed locksmith. He worked quickly and professionally, removing the old deadbolts from the front door and installing heavy-duty, high-security smart locks that were bump and pick resistant. She got 3 sets of keys, one for herself, one spare to keep in her locker at the hospital, and one for David. When David came home from work that evening, it took him a minute to realize what had happened. He tried to unlock the door with his old key. It wouldn't turn. He rang the doorbell. Sarah opened it and handed him a new key. I changed the locks. David's face dropped. Why? Because your mother had a duplicate, which you promised to take back 2 weeks ago. I forgot. It doesn't matter now. What about Mom? What if something happens? If something happens, she can call 911 or call us. Like all normal people, David turned red, stormed into the bedroom, and threw his bag on the bed. You could have at least warned me. Warned you so you'd have time to go to Home Depot and cut a 3rd copy for her. He spun around, his eyes shining with hurt. I don't understand what is going on with you. She's my mother. She isn't a stranger. This is my home, and I decide who has the keys to it. Right. You're home. I'm just temporarily squatting here. Yes. Sarah was exhausted. She rubbed her temples. David, stop. You know exactly what I mean. I know you bought this place before the wedding, and that I'm a nobody here. I never said that, but you think it. They fought. It was their first real, explosive fight in 3 years of marriage. David yelled that she was cold-hearted, that family meant nothing to her, and that she was a control freak. Sarah stayed silent, knowing it was useless to argue. He could only see his own righteousness and his mother's. By late that night, they reconciled formally, at least. David apologized. Sarah nodded. He hugged her, and she didn't push him away. But something fundamental between them had snapped. 3 days later, Sarah found a letter in the mail. She was sorting through the usual junk mail, utility bills, and local flyers when she saw an envelope from a local real estate and estate planning law firm. She tore it open right there in the lobby. Inside was an official inquiry requesting confirmation of a power of attorney to execute a quitclaim deed, transferring a 50% ownership stake of her condo to an Ashley Zueva. Sarah read it twice. Then she pulled out her phone and dialed the number on the firm's letterhead. A receptionist with a pleasant voice answered. Davis Legal Group, how can I help you? Hello. My name is Sarah Krylova. I just received a letter asking to confirm a power of attorney regarding the gifting of my property. I never signed any such document. The receptionist paused. One moment, ma'am. Let me pull up the file. Sarah heard the clacking of a keyboard. Yes, ma'am. We do have a file open. A Miss Carol Zueva presented a power of attorney supposedly signed by you, authorizing the transfer of the deed. I repeat, I did not sign a power of attorney. Is that clear? Understood. The procedure will be immediately suspended, pending an investigation. You'll need to come to our office in person with your state ID to sign an affidavit. Sarah promised to be there the next day and hung up. Her hands were shaking. Carol had tried to transfer the deed using forged documents. She had forged Sarah's signature, walked into a law firm with fake papers, and tried to legally gift half the condo to her daughter. This wasn't just boundary stomping anymore. This was a felony. Attempted real estate fraud. Sarah went upstairs, locked the door, and sat at the kitchen island staring out the window. Her mind raced. What should she do? File a police report? Confront Carol? Tell David? No, David wouldn't believe it. Or if he did, he'd find an excuse for his mother. He'd say she just wanted to help her daughter, that she got confused by legal jargon, that she didn't mean any harm. Sarah decided to handle it her way. Tomorrow she would go to the attorney, officially block the transaction, swear on the record that the POA was forged, and then she would wait and watch. Carol clearly wouldn't stop at one failed attempt. She would try again, getting more inventive and sneaky, and Sarah had to be ready. The next day she drove to the law firm and signed the affidavit. The attorney, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s, listened carefully and shook her head. Unfortunately, this happens more often than you'd think. Relatives try to quietly transfer real estate, taking advantage of trust or hoping the owner won't notice the paperwork. It's a good thing you caught this mail. What happens to the person who brought in the fake power of attorney? You have every right to file a police report. Forgery and attempted fraud are serious felonies. Sarah thought for a moment and declined. Not yet. Just put a hard block on anything involving this address. No legal transactions whatsoever, without me physically present in your office. Smart move. When she got home, Sarah felt hollowed out. Carol had crossed the point of no return. It was war now. An undeclared war, but war nonetheless. And Sarah fully intended to win. She found David at his desk. He was playing another PC game, clicking his mouse frantically. He didn't even turn around when she walked in. "David, we need to talk." "Uh-huh. Give me a sec. Finishing this match." Sarah reached down and yanked the power cord out of the wall. The monitors went black. "What the hell are you doing?" "We need to talk. Right now." He leaned back in his gaming chair, annoyed. "What now?" "Your mother just tried to transfer half of my condo's deed into your sister's name using a forged power of attorney." David blinked. "What?" "You're hearing things. That's a mistake." "It's not a mistake. I was at the lawyer's office today. They confirmed everything." He shook his head vigorously. "No way. Mom wouldn't do something like that." "She would, and she did. Maybe she just got confused?" Sarah laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Confused? She forged my signature, walked into a law firm with fake legal papers, and tried to steal my property for her daughter. And you call that confused?" David stood up and paced the room. "I'll go talk to her." "Don't." "What do you mean, don't?" "Don't. I want to see what her next move is." "Sarah, are you serious?" She looked him dead in the eye. "Absolutely. Your mother just proved what she's capable of. Now I'm going to be ready for whatever she tries next." "You're turning this into some kind of spy game." "I am protecting my assets." David clenched his fists. "I get it. Your property is more important to you than your family. My family is you and me. Not your mother, and not your sister. Us. They are my family too. Then you need to choose." Silence filled the room. David stared at his wife, refusing to believe what he was hearing. "Are you giving me an ultimatum?" "No. You gave yourself an ultimatum when you handed your mother a key behind my back, when you let her play boss in my home, and when you turned a blind eye to her insane behavior. And now she's escalated to forging legal documents." David said nothing. He turned on his heel, walked out, and slammed the bedroom door. Sarah was left alone in the kitchen. She sat down, resting her hands on the quartz countertop. She felt cold inside. She knew things were only going to get worse. Carol wouldn't back off. Ashley wouldn't either. They were going to push, manipulate, and scheme. And David wouldn't be able to stand up to them. He was too weak, too enmeshed with his mother. Sooner or later, the powder keg was going to blow. Sarah just didn't know exactly when, but she could feel it coming. The next few weeks passed in a tense, suffocating silence. David barely spoke to her. He came home, ate by himself, and locked himself in his room. Carol didn't show her face. Apparently, David had said something to her after all, but Sarah knew this was just the calm before the storm. The enemy was retreating to regroup and strike harder, and she was going to be ready. She just had no idea how vicious that strike would be. 2 weeks after the forgery incident, Sarah was working her usual schedule. 3 night shifts, 2 day shifts, weekends off. David was keeping a low profile, acting like a ghost. He came, went, ate, and slept. Their conversations were strictly logistical: bills, groceries, household chores. Then, suddenly, his behavior shifted. Sarah came home from a Saturday shift, to find a massive bouquet of yellow chrysanthemums on the kitchen counter. Next to them was a card, "I'm sorry for everything. I love you, David." She stood there, staring at the flowers for a long time. Every instinct in her body went on high alert. David never bought flowers just because. Only for Valentine's Day and her birthday. And he definitely never apologized like this. He walked out of the hallway, smiling nervously. "Do you like them? They're beautiful. Thank you. I was thinking, maybe we should go out tonight. Catch a movie. Grab dinner somewhere nice." Sarah looked at him silently. He rubbed his palms together. "We haven't gone out just the two of us in a long time. You work so hard, you're always stressed. We need a break." Okay. They went to a nice Italian restaurant downtown. David ordered a bottle of wine, pasta, dessert. He talked about his job and a new logistics project he was managing. He was trying hard to be charming and attentive. Sarah nodded, ate her food, and gave short answers. She was waiting for the other shoe to drop. The blow came 3 days later. David was sitting on the couch with a mug of coffee. Sarah was folding laundry. He cleared his throat, as if gearing up for a speech. "Sarah, I was thinking about something." She kept folding towels, not looking back. "Our condo is pretty spacious, and it's just the two of us. I was thinking, maybe we could rent out the guest room to a college student or a young professional. The extra rental income would be really nice." Sarah placed a folded towel in the basket, turned around, and looked at him. "No." David blinked. "Why no right off the bat? Let's at least talk about it." "There is nothing to talk about. I am not living with strangers in my own home. But think about the extra cash." "I don't need the extra cash. I need my sanctuary where I can decompress after 12-hour shifts." David set his mug on the coffee table and stood up. "Sarah, you can't be this rigid. People rent out rooms all the time. It's normal. Let them. I'm not doing it. And what if I insist?" She met his gaze without flinching. "You can insist all you want. The condo is in my name. I make the final call." David's face darkened. "Here we go again. My condo. I'm a nobody here." "Exactly. You aren't on the deed. You don't get to decide who lives here." He clenched his jaw, spun around, and marched into the bedroom, slamming the door. Sarah went back to the laundry. Alarm bells were ringing in her head. David didn't come up with this idea on his own. Someone fed him this script. And it didn't take a genius to figure out who. A week later, the doorbell rang early on a Sunday morning. Sarah opened it to find Ashley standing on the porch with her 2 kids, a 5-year-old boy and a 3-year-old girl. They were wearing winter coats and carrying little backpacks. "Hey, Sarah, can we come in?" Ashley pushed her way inside without waiting for an answer. The kids ran past her, immediately exploring the living room. "Is David home? Still sleeping? That's fine. We'll be super quiet." Ashley made herself at home in the kitchen. The kids started running around the couch. Sarah just stood in the hallway, watching. Ashley pulled a Yeti thermos out of her bag and poured herself some coffee. "You don't mind that we dropped by, do you? We were just at the park down the street and I thought, hey, let's go say hi to my brother. David isn't awake yet." "Yeah, I'll wait." Sarah walked into the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. Ashley looked at her with a pathetic, calculated smile. "Listen, Sarah, I am so embarrassed about everything with you." "Why?" "The whole thing with the power of attorney. Mom told me what happened. I swear to God, I had no idea. She cooked that up entirely on her own. I only found out after the fact." "Right. I'm so sorry. I would never have agreed to something like that." Sarah just nodded, saying nothing. Ashley sat in silence for a moment, then let out a heavy, dramatic sigh. "We are having such a hard time right now, you know?" "With what?" "Our landlord raised the rent. By double. Can you believe that? We literally can't afford it. My husband's paychecks have been bouncing, and the salon cut my hours. The kids are growing. They need so much stuff. Pre-K, clothes, groceries." Sarah listened impassively. Ashley stared into her coffee mug. "We thought about moving to a cheaper complex, but the reviews are terrible. Black mold, broken windows, sketchy neighbors. You can't raise kids in a place like that, and paying $2,000 a month for an old 1-bedroom isn't an option either." "I'm sorry to hear that." Ashley looked up, her eyes wide. You guys have so much space here. 2 big bedrooms, a great floor plan, and it's just the two of you. Sarah placed her glass in the sink. Ashley, if you drove all the way over here to ask if you can move in, the answer is no. Ashley's face flushed red. I wasn't asking for free. I just thought, maybe we could work out a temporary arrangement. Just for a couple of months. We would pay you, obviously. Chip in for utilities, buy groceries, help clean. No. But why? We're family. Which is exactly why family should live in separate houses, so we don't ruin our relationship. Ashley's lips thinned into a hard line. So, you really don't care that my kids are going to be living in squalor. Your kids have a mother and a father. You are grown adults. Figure out your own problems. You are such a bitch. Sarah shrugged and walked out of the kitchen. David had just woken up. He walked into the hallway in his sweatpants, saw his sister, and his face lit up. Ash, what a surprise. We just dropped by with the kids. I wanted to talk to you. They went into the living room. Sarah could hear their hushed voices. Ashley was complaining passionately. David was murmuring in a soothing tone. 10 minutes later, they walked out. Ashley grabbed her kids, bundled them up, shot Sarah a look of pure venom, and stormed out, slamming the front door. David stood in the hallway, staring at his feet. Would it have killed you to say yes? Say yes to what? Letting them stay here for a couple months. They're family. My family, not mine. The kids are tiny. They need a safe place to live. Then their parents need to provide a safe place to live. That's their job, not mine. David shook his head. I don't even know who you are anymore. You've become so cold. I've started enforcing my boundaries. There's a difference. He turned and marched into the bedroom, dramatically slamming the door again. Sarah walked back to the kitchen and finished her water. A deep sense of dread settled in her stomach. First, David bringing up renting a room. Then Ashley begging to move in. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a coordinated attack. Carol was probing the perimeter, trying to find a weak spot. And the scariest part was that David was completely, 100% on his mother's side. A few days later, the siege escalated. Carol showed up again, not with a duplicate key since she didn't have one anymore, but by ringing the doorbell when she knew Sarah was home on her day off. Hello, sweetheart. I made a pot of chili, thought I'd bring some over. Sarah silently let her in. Carol marched into the kitchen and put the Tupperware on the stove. Is David home? At work. Pity. I wanted to talk to him. Carol looked around the room, evaluating the territory again. You keep the place nice and clean. Good job. You're a good housewife. Sarah didn't respond. Carol opened the stainless steel fridge and peered inside. You're low on groceries. Let me run to the store for you. No need. Oh, it's no trouble. I'd love to. I'll buy my own groceries when I need them. Carol shut the fridge and turned to face her daughter-in-law. The fake smile vanished. You know, Sarah, I wanted to talk to you, adult to adult. I'm listening. Do you understand that my daughter is in a desperate situation? 2 kids, a husband making minimum wage, insane rent prices, and you have an entire room sitting here empty. It's not empty. We're planning to turn it into a nursery. Carol scoffed. A nursery? You've been married 3 years, and there's no baby. Maybe stop planning and start having them. Sarah ground her teeth, fighting the urge to snap. That is between David and me. Not you. How is it not my business? I'm his mother. I want grandkids. But you're too obsessed with your nursing career and your paychecks. Your condo. Your deed. What about family, Sarah? I'm exhausted, Carol. I have a shift tonight and I need to sleep. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Her mother-in-law didn't budge. You know, under state law, a husband is entitled to half of the marital home, even if the deed is only in your name. Sarah's blood ran cold. Carol smiled, savoring the reaction. Didn't know that, did you? It's called community property. Anything acquired or improved during the marriage is split 50/50. David could file for his half in a divorce if he wanted to. I bought this condo before we got married. But you did renovations. You bought new furniture, new appliances. That's all shared assets. A good lawyer could easily argue that the condo's value increased because of David's financial contributions. Sarah exhaled slowly. You want David to file for divorce and force a partition sale. I want you to be fair. David is my son. He is your husband. He has the exact same rights to this place as you do, but you treat him like he's just an unwanted guest. My condo. Yeah, for now, but judges can change that. David can demand his legal equity, and then half of this place is his, and he can decide who lives in the spare room. Carol picked up her purse and walked to the front door. She turned around on the threshold. Think about what I said, Sarah. Being a family means having obligations, not just rights. You need to step up when your blood asks for help. The door clicked shut. Sarah stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen, her fists clenched so tight her fingernails dug into her palms. Carol had just openly threatened her. She was heavily implying that David would sue her for half the property, and knowing David's weak spine, Sarah knew he was capable of doing it if his mother pushed him hard enough. She needed to protect herself. The very next morning, Sarah used some PTO to take the day off and drove to a law firm. She had booked a consultation with Miss Davis, an experienced family law attorney recommended by her best friend, Jessica. Miss Davis was a sharp woman in her 50s who spoke in clear, no-nonsense sentences. After hearing the whole story, Miss Davis nodded. It's an ugly situation, but you are not in critical danger legally. You purchased the property prior to the marriage. That is documented on the title. Therefore, in this state, it is considered separate property, not community property. But what if my husband claims he contributed to the renovations? He could try, but the burden of proof is on him. He would have to provide bank statements, receipts, and invoices proving that his specific income paid for the capital improvements or materials. Do you have records of who paid for what? Sarah thought for a second. I think so. We did the remodel 4 years ago, before we were legally married. I bought almost all the furniture, the appliances too. There you go. If he cannot produce a paper trail proving substantial financial investment, a judge is not going to award him equity in your premarital asset. Your mother-in-law is blowing smoke. Why would she say that? It's an intimidation tactic. Very common. They try to scare you into voluntarily signing a quitclaim deed or letting them move in to establish tenancy. Miss Davis pulled out a legal pad and started writing. Here is my official advice to you. Dig up every single document proving you purchased this condo with your own funds. Mortgage statements, the closing disclosure, bank statements showing the down payment. If you have proof that your husband did not contribute financially, save that too. Text messages, credit card statements, whatever shores up your defense. Okay, and one more thing. If you feel this situation escalating, you need to seriously consider drafting a post-nuptial agreement or filing for divorce, because people like this do not stop. It will only get worse. Sarah thanked the lawyer and drove home. She opened her safe and pulled out her accordion folder. She spent hours organizing the paper trail. The original purchase agreement with only her name, the bank statements showing the down payment coming from her solo checking account, the Home Depot receipts for the remodel, all paid with her Visa card before the wedding. David truly hadn't put a single dime into the condo. He had moved into a fully furnished, renovated home. All he had done was live there. Sarah even paid the HOA fees and utilities because she made more money. She packed all the documents into a binder and locked them in the safe. If it came to a courtroom battle, she had her armor, but she prayed it wouldn't come to that. Over the next few days, Carol showed up every single afternoon. Sometimes with soup, sometimes with leftovers, sometimes just checking in. David had obviously gone to a hardware store and cut her a new key, because occasionally Sarah would come home from a shift to find Carol already inside. I scrubbed the baseboards, Carol would say. They were filthy. You work so much, you don't have time to clean properly. Sarah tolerated these home invasions in silence, but inside, she was boiling over. Carol was scent-marking the condo, proving she could come and go as she pleased, and David was letting her. One afternoon, Sarah caught her mother-in-law in the master bedroom. Carol was standing in front of Sarah's open closet, examining the shelving. "What are you doing?" Carol turned around, completely unashamed. Just seeing how you organize your clothes, you could consolidate this a lot better. Free up some closet space. For what? Well, if someone suddenly has to move in, you'll need to make room. Sarah stepped closer. Carol, nobody is moving in here. I've already made that explicitly clear. We'll see. Carol walked past her into the hallway and grabbed her purse. I'll be back tomorrow. I want to regrout the guest bathroom. Do not come back. I have to. You never have the time. Sarah walked her out, threw the deadbolt, and collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. It was psychological torture. Carol was acting like she already held the deed. David didn't stop her. He practically enabled it. That night, David casually mentioned he was going on a business trip. 3 days in Ohio. Corporate wants me at the regional logistics meeting. Okay. Sarah wasn't surprised. She had been waiting for something like this. David was leaving town so he wouldn't have to be present for whatever his mother was about to do. David flew out on Monday morning. By Monday evening, the doorbell rang. It was Carol, holding plastic grocery bags. Thought I'd come cook you dinner. It's lonely in here by yourself. Sarah let her in. Her mother-in-law marched into the kitchen, unpacked chicken and vegetables, and started making a racket, chopping, boiling, commenting on everything she was doing. Sarah sat in the living room, pretending to watch Netflix. Carol finally left an hour later, promising to return tomorrow. And she did. And the day after that, every time she visited, she lingered. She walked through the rooms, analyzing the layout. She casually interrogated Sarah about her hospital schedule. So, when are your shifts this week? Are you on days or nights? It varies. Depends on the floor schedule. Do you have any night shifts coming up? Sarah looked at her closely. Why do you ask? Carol gave a sickly, sweet smile. Just curious. It must be so exhausting working through the night. I'm used to it. Sarah specifically did not mention that she was scheduled for a 1-2-hour night shift on Thursday. Let Carol think she was completely clueless. On Wednesday, David flew back from Ohio. He was overly neutral, avoiding eye contact and barely speaking. Sarah noticed he was constantly texting someone, quickly locking his phone screen whenever she walked past. Thursday morning arrived. Sarah got dressed in her scrubs, grabbed her tote, and drove to the hospital for what was supposed to be a day shift. But as soon as she clocked in, she went straight to her charge nurse, faked a terrible migraine, and asked to use sick time to go home. The charge nurse approved it without a second thought. Sarah left the hospital at 2 p.m. and drove back to her complex, but she didn't pull into her assigned parking spot. Instead, she parked her car 2 blocks away, walked back, and hid behind a large brick retaining wall that gave her a clear view of her building's entrance. And she waited. 20 minutes later, a beat-up red Honda Civic pulled up to the curb. Sarah recognized it immediately. It was Ashley's husband's car. Ashley stepped out of the passenger side, followed by her 2 kids. Then her husband got out, popping the trunk. Carol walked up the sidewalk a moment later, waving her arms and directing traffic. They started pulling cardboard boxes and black trash bags out of the trunk. A lot of boxes. Carol reached into her purse and pulled out a shiny new brass key. She unlocked the building's front door, and the entire family hauled their belongings inside. Sarah stood frozen behind the brick wall. Her heart was hammering against her ribs, her hands shaking with pure, unadulterated rage. David had gone behind her back again, made a 3rd copy of the key, and given it to his mother. And now they were actively moving Ashley's family into her home while they thought she was at the hospital. She pulled out her phone and called her best friend, Jessica. Hey, can I crash at your place tonight? Of course. Did something happen? I'll tell you when I get there. Give me an hour. Sarah walked back to her car and drove away. On the way to Jessica's apartment, she stopped at a liquor store and bought a bottle of Cabernet and some chocolate. Jessica opened her door, took one look at Sarah, and gasped. You look like a ghost. Are you okay? I'm fine, just exhausted. They sat at Jessica's kitchen island. Jessica poured the wine. Sarah unloaded everything. She told her about the forged power of attorney, Carol's relentless invasions, David's betrayal, and what she had just witnessed outside her own building. Jessica listened, her jaw practically on the floor. That is absolute insanity. It's criminal. What are you going to do? I actually do have a night shift tomorrow night. I'm going to work my 12 hours, and then I'm going to drive home in the morning. Sarah looked her friend dead in the eye. And we are going to see who wins this war. Jessica sat in silence for a moment. Are you sure you can handle this alone? Do you want me to come with you for backup? No. I need to do this myself. They finished the wine and went to bed. Sarah barely slept. Her mind was running through the tactical plan. Tomorrow morning, she would walk into her condo and find Ashley and her family fully moved in. Carol would probably be there, orchestrating everything. David might be there too. And that is when the final battle would begin. Sarah was ready. The deed and ownership documents were locked in her hospital locker. Her phone was fully charged, with plenty of storage for 4K video, 911, and her lawyer's numbers were favorited on her speed dial. She knew exactly what to do. Step by step. No emotion, no screaming, no crying, just cold, calculated execution. Carol had finally crossed the point of no return, and now it was time for the reckoning. The next morning, Sarah woke up early, drank coffee with Jessica, thanked her for letting her crash, and drove to the hospital for her actual night shift. She worked a grueling 12 hours. It was a nightmare shift. Around 12:30 a.m., the ER received 5 trauma patients from a massive pileup on the interstate, and one 8-wheeler had rear-ended a sedan, pushing it into oncoming traffic, where it collided head-on with a passenger van. 3 patients were critical. 2 had compound fractures and severe lacerations. Sarah worked without stopping. IV lines, wound packing, prepping for emergency surgery. Running patients to CT scans. There was blood, screaming, and weeping family members in the waiting room. One of the victims, a man in his 40s, coded and died on the operating table from massive internal bleeding. The trauma team did everything they could, but he was gone. By the time the sun came up, Sarah was barely standing. Her body felt like it was made of lead, her eyes burned from exhaustion. She changed in the staff locker room, splashed freezing water on her face, and stared at herself in the mirror. She was pale, with dark purple bags under her eyes. Her gaze was completely hollow. It was time to go home. She opened her locker, took out the binder containing all her real estate documents, shoved it into her tote bag, and walked out into the crisp, chilly September morning. The sky was overcast with gray clouds, and a light drizzle was falling. She got into her car, started the engine, and blasted the heater. On the way to her condo, she stopped at a Kroger and bought a plastic bag with a loaf of bread, milk, eggs, and a few vegetables. It was a prop. If they asked why she was coming home later than a normal shift, she could say she stopped for groceries. Not that anyone was going to be asking questions. Sarah parked in her assigned spot, grabbed her tote and the grocery bag, and walked to her building. She punched her code into the lobby keypad. The elevator was out of order, as it always was at the worst possible moments. She had to take the stairs to the 5th floor. With every step she climbed, the tension in her chest tightened like a coiled spring. Her heartbeat was steady. Her hands were perfectly still. Her mind was crystal clear. She knew exactly what she was going to see, exactly what she was going to say, and exactly what she was going to do. She reached the 5th floor landing and stopped. There, pushed up against the hallway wall right across from her door, were stacks of moving boxes and black trash bags. They were neatly taped up and tied with twine. Sarah recognized the labels. She recognized her own belongings, her clothes, her winter boots, her nursing textbooks, her expensive makeup palettes. Even her framed photographs were resting on top of one of the boxes. They had evicted her. Sarah placed the grocery bag quietly on the carpet. She pulled her iPhone out of her scrub pocket and checked the battery. 92%. She opened the camera app, swiped to video, and pressed the red record button. She walked up to her door, slid her key into the deadbolt, and turned it. Click. The key worked. They hadn't had time to call a locksmith, or they were just too arrogant to think she'd fight back. Sarah pushed the door open and stepped inside. The condo smelled strongly of fried onions and maple syrup. In the kitchen, Carol was standing at the stove wearing a floral apron, happily flipping pancakes. Her hair was tied back in a bandana, and she wore the smug, satisfied expression of a matriarch who had finally conquered her castle. Voices echoed from the living room, kids laughing, feet stomping, the sound of furniture scraping across hardwood. Ashley was yelling something to her husband, who grunted in reply. Carol turned at the sound of the front door. She saw Sarah standing in the entryway and beamed a massive, theatrical smile. "Oh, good, you're here. Your things are already out in the hallway. Take them, sweetheart. Ashley and her husband are getting settled. They have kids, and they need this condo more than you do." Sarah slowly lowered her tote bag to the floor, never breaking eye contact with her mother-in-law. Carol stood there, holding a spatula, smiling, waiting for the reaction. She was waiting for the shock, the tears, the screaming, the hysterical breakdown. She didn't get it. After those words, there was absolutely no stopping Sarah. She raised her iPhone, pointing the camera lens directly at Carol's face. Today is September 6th, 2025. The time is 9:37 a.m. My name is Sarah Krylova. I am standing inside my property located at 123 Maple Street, apartment 5B. There are unauthorized trespassers inside my home who are refusing to leave the premises. Carol slowly lowered the spatula. The smug smile melted off her face. "What the hell are you doing?" "I am documenting a criminal trespass." "What trespass? This is my son's house." "No, this is my house. I am the sole legal owner." Sarah walked past her down the hallway, keeping the camera perfectly steady. She panned into the living room. Ashley and her husband were unpacking children's clothes. Toys were strewn across the rug, baby clothes were piled on the sofa, and a bulky double stroller was parked in the corner. The two kids were sitting on the floor, building a Lego tower. Documenting for the record, there are 4 unauthorized individuals in the living room: Ashley Zueva, her husband, and 2 minor children. They have illegally broken into my home and are refusing to leave. Ashley jumped up from the sofa. "What the hell are you doing?" "I am filming evidence for the police." "What police?" "Sarah, are you psychotic?" Sarah ignored her completely. She pivoted and walked down the hall to the master bedroom. There, lying on her expensive mattress in his sweatpants, was David, scrolling on his phone. He looked up, saw his wife pointing a camera at him, and all the color drained from his face. Sarah, documenting for the record. In the master bedroom is David Krylov, my husband, who is not on the deed to this property. Sarah, put the phone down. Let's talk about this calmly. No. She walked back out to the hallway. Carol physically blocked her path, her face twisted in a vicious snarl. Turn that camera off right now. No. I am your mother-in-law. You are a criminal trespasser who broke into my home. You have exactly 10 minutes to pack your people and leave this property voluntarily. The clock is ticking. Carol lunged forward, trying to snatch the phone out of Sarah's hands. Sarah easily sidestepped her, raising the camera higher. Documenting for the record. Carol Zueva is attempting to assault me and destroy evidence. What evidence? This is my son's home. 9 minutes and 40 seconds. Ashley ran out of the living room, followed closely by her husband, a beefy guy with a neck tattoo and a very nervous look on his face. "What is your problem?" Ashley screamed. "We moved all our stuff in." "I have my kids in here. 9 minutes and 20 seconds. If you do not leave immediately, I am dialing 911. Ashley let out a hysterical laugh. 911. "Do you hear yourself? We are family. We are relatives. You are home invaders. And I am calling the police right now." Sarah swiped down on her screen and tapped the SOS emergency dialer, keeping the camera rolling. Ring. Ring. Carol lunged again, desperately grabbing at Sarah's scrubs. Sarah shoved her back and backed up toward the front window. A stern operator answered. 911. "What is your emergency?" "Hello. My name is Sarah Krylova. I need officers dispatched immediately for a home invasion and criminal trespassing at 123 Maple Street, apartment 5B. Are the intruders still inside the residence, ma'am?" "Yes. There are 4 adults and 2 children inside my home. They entered without my permission, moved my personal belongings out into the public hallway, and are aggressively refusing to leave. I am the sole homeowner, and I have my deed in my hand. Copy that. I am dispatching patrol units to your location right now. Please stay on the line or get to a safe place. Carol was screaming now, waving her arms erratically. Ashley tried to grab Sarah's wrist. Sarah yanked her arm away, the camera still capturing everything. Documenting for the record, Ashley Zueva is initiating physical contact to prevent me from speaking to emergency dispatch. I'm not touching you. I just want you to stop being crazy. The police are already on their way. You better start grabbing your bags. Carol grabbed her own hair in a panic. David, are you really going to stand there and let this bitch throw your own mother out onto the street? David walked slowly out of the bedroom. He looked completely pathetic, his face blotchy and panicked. Sarah, please. Why are you doing this? Can't we just talk? It's way too late for talking, David. You broke into my home, threw my possessions out like garbage, and moved squatters in behind my back. That is a felony. What felony? I'm your husband. We're married. You are not the homeowner. You have zero legal right to grant tenancy to anyone. David looked at his mother, then back at his wife. He opened his mouth, closed it, and had absolutely nothing to say. Carol marched right up into Sarah's personal space. Her eyes were burning with pure hatred, her voice trembling. Do you comprehend what you are doing? You are throwing an innocent family out. You are making toddlers homeless. You have a condo, Carol, and your daughter has a rental. Go back to them. You are a heartless, evil bitch. I am protecting my real estate. Carol raised her hand, pulling it back as if she was about to slap Sarah across the face. Sarah didn't even blink. She just held the camera steady, documenting for the record. Imminent threat of physical violence from Carol Zueva. Carol froze, realizing she was being recorded. She slowly lowered her hand, spun around, marched into the kitchen, turned off the stove, and violently ripped the floral apron over her head, throwing it on the floor. Fine. We'll see what kind of tune you're singing when David files for a divorce and forces the sale of this place. Half of this equity is his by law. I bought this condo before the wedding. Your son hasn't put a single penny of his own money into the mortgage or the remodel. I have the entire paper trail. So don't hold your breath. We'll see about that. Carol snatched her purse and stormed toward the front door. Ashley stood in the center of the living room, hugging her arms around her chest, looking terrified. Her husband was already frantically shoving toys and clothes back into black trash bags. The two kids stared at the adults with wide, frightened eyes. Mom, what do we do? Ashley asked, her voice shaking. We are leaving. Let this psycho live here by herself. They began dragging their bags toward the door. Sarah stood in the hallway, recording every second of their retreat. David walked up to her, reaching out to touch her shoulder. Sarah, please stop. This is insane. Do not touch me. I didn't want it to happen like this. Mom just told me. Your mother dictates what happens in my home, and you blindly obey her. You treated me like a piece of furniture you could just put in the hallway, and now you're shocked that I called the cops. David took a step back. I thought we could just talk it out. I figured we let Ashley stay for a few months. She saves up some money, gets a better job, and moves out. You thought that? And you didn't think you needed to ask my permission? Because I knew you'd say no. Exactly, because it is my home. And I am the only one who decides who sleeps here. Carol shoved past them carrying a box, shooting Sarah a look that could kill. You are going to regret this. You are going to regret this day for the rest of your life. Maybe. But not today. A heavy knock pounded on the front door. Sarah opened it. Standing in the hallway were two city police officers. The lead officer was a burly man in his 40s, with a tired face. His partner was younger, hand resting casually on his duty belt. Morning. Someone call 911 about a trespasser. Yes, I did. Please come in. Sarah stepped back to let them inside. The lead officer scanned the hallway, taking in the chaotic scene of people holding trash bags and boxes, and the crying children. What exactly is the problem here, ma'am? Sarah pulled the heavy binder out of her tote bag. I am the sole legal owner of this condominium. Here is the recorded deed, my closing documents, and my state ID. These people broke into my home without my consent, physically removed my belongings into the public hallway, and were refusing to leave. The officer took the binder, flipped it open, and verified the name on the deed against Sarah's driver's license. You are the sole property owner? Yes, sir. And who are these people? My mother-in-law, my sister-in-law's family, and my husband. The officer turned to Carol. Ma'am, do you have any documentation proving you have a legal right to establish residency here? A lease? Mail? Carol puffed out her chest. What documentation? This is my son's house. Is your son on the deed to this property? No, but he's her husband. He lives here. The officer turned to David. Sir, are you on the mortgage or the deed? David shook his head, looking at the floor. No. Do you own this property in any capacity? No. Then unfortunately, you have no legal authority to invite third parties to establish residency here against the homeowner's will. Carol gasped dramatically. Excuse me? He's her husband. Ma'am, being married doesn't automatically grant him the right to move tenants into a premarital asset without the deed holder's consent. Not in this state. The officer handed the binder back to Sarah. Everything appears to be in order. Ma'am, you have every right to have them removed from the premises. He turned to the family. Folks, you need to grab your belongings and vacate the property immediately. If you refuse, you will be arrested for criminal trespassing. Carol clutched her chest, staggering back against the wall. Oh my God, my heart. I think I'm having a heart attack. The officer didn't even blink. He reached for his shoulder mic. Dispatch, send EMS to my location for a panic attack. Carol immediately stood up straight. No, cancel it. I don't need an ambulance. I'll drive myself. Ashley grabbed her kids by the hands. Her husband hoisted the heaviest boxes. They filed out into the hallway and headed straight for the stairwell. Carol followed right behind them, shooting one final, venomous glare at Sarah. Her mother-in-law was truly terrified by what Sarah had done. She had never expected the quiet, exhausted, overworked nurse to be capable of something so ruthless. She never expected her to call the cops on her own husband's family, to record them, and to throw them out into the hallway without an ounce of pity or hesitation. David was left standing alone in the entryway. The lead officer looked at him. Are you leaving too, sir? David looked at his wife with pleading eyes. Sarah, get out, David. Grab your bags and go live with your mother. You can't do this. I'm your husband. Not anymore. I'll be contacting a lawyer. We can fix this. We can talk. There is absolutely nothing left to talk about. You chose your mother. Go live with her. The older cop cleared his throat. Sir, I highly suggest you listen to her. She has the legal right to ask you to leave the premises to prevent a domestic disturbance. David stood frozen for another minute. Then he hung his head, turned around, and walked into the master bedroom. He came out 5 minutes later, carrying a duffel bag stuffed with clothes. He walked past Sarah without making eye contact. The door clicked shut behind him. The officer looked at Sarah. Do you want to press formal charges for breaking and entering? Yes. I want to file a full report for criminal trespassing. All right. We'll write it up at the precinct. Can you come down there today? I'll be there this afternoon. I just need to sleep for a few hours first. Understood. Here's my card. Call the non-emergency line when you're headed down. The police officers left. Sarah threw the deadbolt, locked the chain, and leaned her back against the heavy wooden door. Silence. For the first time in hours, there was absolute, ringing silence. She walked slowly through the condo. In the kitchen, a half-cooked batch of pancakes was getting cold on the stove. Onion skins and dirty knives cluttered her counters. In the living room, a few plastic toys were abandoned on the rug. In the bedroom, David's closet doors were left wide open, clothes spilling off the hangers. Sarah slid down the wall until she was sitting on the hallway floor. Her phone was still recording. She finally pressed stop, set the phone on the carpet, and buried her face in her knees. She didn't cry. She just sat there, breathing. Eventually, she stood up, walked into the bathroom, and turned the shower on as hot as it would go. She stripped off her scrubs and stood under the scalding water. The water washed away the 12-hour shift, the adrenaline, the tension, the disgust. She stood there for 20 minutes until her skin was bright red. When she got out, she dried off, put on her comfiest sweatpants, and walked out into the hallway to retrieve her belongings. She dragged her boxes and bags back inside, stacking them in the corner. She didn't have the energy to unpack them. She collapsed into her bed and fell asleep instantly. She woke up late that evening. Outside her window, the city was dark. Sarah got up, went to the kitchen, scraped the cold pancakes into the trash, scrubbed the pan, wiped down the counters, took out the garbage, and turned on the electric kettle. Her phone was blowing up with missed calls and texts. David had sent a dozen long, furious paragraphs about how cold, heartless, and insane she was. Carol had left screaming voicemails, threatening to sue her for emotional distress and marital assets. Ashley had texted a long rant, blaming her for making 2 children homeless. Sarah calmly blocked all 3 numbers. Then she called Miss Davis, her attorney, and gave her a rundown of the morning's events. Miss Davis chuckled approvingly. "You handled that perfectly. Now we file for divorce. And under no circumstances do you let him back into that property, even if he comes begging on his knees." "I won't." "Excellent. Come to my office tomorrow morning, and we'll start drafting the paperwork." Sarah thanked her and hung up. She poured herself a cup of chamomile tea and looked out the window. The city was alive. Streetlights glowed, cars drove down the avenue, people walked on the sidewalks. A completely normal Friday night. But her entire life had just flipped upside down. The next day, Sarah went to the police precinct and filed her formal statement, then drove to the law firm to sign the divorce petition. A week later, David was served with the papers. He tried calling her from burner numbers, begging her to meet him for coffee, swearing that it would never happen again. Sarah's responses were brief. "Talk to my lawyer." Carol tried to ambush her in the building's lobby a few times. Sarah immediately called the police. The responding officers gave Carol a stern criminal trespass warning, threatening her with a night in jail. Carol never showed her face there again. Ashley took to Facebook, posting long, dramatic rants about her evil, psychotic sister-in-law who threw a family with toddlers out onto the freezing streets. Mutual acquaintances read the posts. Some believed the spin and unfriended Sarah, while others saw right through it and reached out to support her. 2 months passed. The divorce was finalized surprisingly fast. Once Miss Davis demanded David produce financial records proving his investments into the property. He quickly realized he had absolutely zero legal leg to stand on and signed the settlement. Sarah kept the condo free and clear. David moved back into his mother's 1-bedroom apartment and found a new job. Occasionally, Sarah would hear through the grapevine that he was still complaining to anyone who would listen about his greedy, calculating ex-wife. Let him talk. Ashley and her husband eventually had to move out of their rental, settling for a much cheaper, run-down apartment in the deep suburbs. Carol was forced to help them financially, and essentially became their live-in nanny to help make ends meet. That family went on living their chaotic lives, and Sarah went on living hers. Some people really did turn their backs on her. They told her she acted too harshly, that family is family, and she should have had more empathy and helped them out. Sarah never bothered defending herself. She simply deleted those people from her contacts and moved on. Her real friends stayed. Jessica had been her rock since day one, helping her navigate the emotional fallout of the divorce. Her coworkers at the hospital were entirely on her side. They knew Sarah to be a hardworking, honest, and fiercely loyal person. Life settled into a new rhythm. Work, home, occasional brunches with friends. It was quiet, steady, peaceful. And yes, sometimes it was lonely. On a cold Friday evening in November, Sarah came home from a long day shift. She unlocked her front door using her high-security key, the one that absolutely no one else could copy without her authorization. She stepped inside. Silence. Perfect cleanliness. Order. She took off her winter coat, hung it in the closet, kicked off her shoes, and walked into the kitchen. She turned on the kettle, grabbed her favorite mug, dropped in a tea bag, poured the boiling water, and sat down at the window. Outside, the city twinkled in the dark. Headlights streamed down the wet pavement. It was freezing out, the sky heavy with winter clouds. Snow was coming soon. Sarah sipped her tea, letting the warmth spread through her chest. She was exhausted. She wanted to sleep, but she didn't want to get up and walk to the bedroom just yet. It felt too good to just sit here in the quiet, completely alone. Sometimes, late at night, the doubts would creep in. Did I make a mistake? Should I have tried to compromise? Maybe I really could have let Ashley stay in the guest room for a couple of months to help them get back on their feet. But then Sarah would remember that morning. Her belongings boxed up in the hallway like trash. Carol standing at the stove, acting like the lady of the manor. David, hiding in the bedroom, not even attempting to defend his own wife. And instantly, every single doubt vanished. She had done the right thing. She had paid an incredibly high price for it. Loneliness, public judgment, the destruction of her marriage. She lost her husband, though. If she was being completely honest, she had lost him a long time ago. She lost him the exact moment he chose his mother's comfort over his wife's security. But in exchange, she kept what mattered most: her home, her dignity, and her freedom. Sarah finished her tea, rinsed the mug in the sink, turned off the kitchen lights, and walked into her bedroom. She laid down on her bed, pulled the heavy duvet over her shoulders, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would be a new day. A new shift, new patience, new challenges. Life was moving forward. Even if she was alone, even if some people thought she was a monster, even if the silence was sometimes deafening, this was the life she chose, and she didn't regret a single second of it. Sometimes, you have to lose people in order to save yourself. And that is always the right choice, even when it breaks your heart.